everyone, I wanted to take a closer look at using double-sided tape to do a zipper installation with you. When I posted the favorite things video about the double-sided tape, there were comments that said people have trouble using double-sided tape, it gums up their needle, and it really gives them a lot of grief. It also comes up a lot around the different bag making groups, and I wanted to demonstrate to you why using 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape should mean that regardless of your machine, regardless of your needle, you shouldn't be actually sewing through the double-sided tape, and therefore it should not be gumming up your needle. Unless you are using a basting stitch or a very narrow seam allowance, like 1/4 of an inch or less, you shouldn't have trouble with your double-sided tape gumming up your needle if you take the correct steps when using it to keep it out of your seam allowance. So the first thing you're going to do when you put on your double-sided tape is line it up with the very edge of your fabric. You want it to be as close to that edge as you can get it. Then you're going to put it onto your zipper the same way as we've done in many videos. I'm going to fold this in half just to mark that center. We'll just make it a little bit easier. Find the center of the exterior also, and then line those up. Can just be a little easier than trying to match it at the sides with this shape pouch. And then when you're happy with that, sandwich the zipper with your lining fabric, which also has the double-sided tape right up against that upper edge. And then when you go over to your sewing machine to sew your zipper in, you're going to use a seam allowance that is wider than 1/4 of an inch. If you're using 1/4 of an inch, you may have some trouble with your double-sided tape, but if you use anything wider than that, I like to use 5/16 of an inch, so it doesn't have to be very much wider, just a very, very slight bit wider. Then you will be able to clear your double-sided tape both when you sew in your zipper and when you turn to top stitch it. So I'm going to go and sew this with my zipper foot at 5/16 of an inch, and then I will show you that it has not sewn through that double-sided tape that we just stuck down. So you can see I've got my zipper sewn in. You can see that my seam allowance is 5/16 of an inch, so it's quite narrow, but it's just ever so slightly wider than 1/4 of an inch. When I open this back out to show you where the tape is, you can see the edge of the tape is here well clear of where my stitch line is. This is where the stitch line is folded over, right there. This is all hidden. So the double-sided tape is well clear of where I have just sewn that. And there's a good amount of space there. If I grab that ruler again, you can see that there is slightly more than 1/8 of an inch. So when I fold this over to sew through the exterior for the top stitching, and granted this is the lining, but it is the same on the exterior. I can pull this open for you too. And again, you can see here, I've got my seam allowance here, 5/16 of an inch, and my 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape is clear of where that zipper seam is. And when I top stitch this at 1/8 of an inch, that's going to fall about here and remain clear of that double-sided tape so it won't gum up my needle. The same is true when I put a second row of double-sided tape along here before I top stitch the side of that zipper, keeping it tucked up here. And this is kind of tricky to see because it's the black, but once I fold it, you'll be able to tell. Right up against the edge, fold that open, press it down. And when I sew through the exterior, whether I sew through just the exterior for my top stitching or both of the layers, that 1/8 of an inch will remain clear of the double-sided tape when I do that top stitching. So I'm going to go and sew along here to show you that it does clear that double-sided tape for the top stitching also. So that top stitching is done. And I've used a contrasting thread on the back so that you can see the line of stitches here. And then let me open that out again. And here on this side, the double-sided tape that I put on the exterior is outside of the line of stitches. You can see that double-sided tape here, and the stitches have missed it. And the same is true for this layer. If I peel this back, when we first did the zipper, if we peel that lining away, the double-sided tape is just outside of the line of stitches right here because we've used the narrow double-sided tape and we've kept it right up close to the edge of the material. And that has meant that I can sew it without having any trouble with the stickiness of the double-sided tape coming up my needles. So I hope that helps you to be more confident using double-sided tape in your sewing. If you are careful about keeping it right up to the edge and you use the skinny 1/8 of an inch, unless you are doing a basting stitch or you are using a pattern that calls for a fairly narrow seam allowance, you shouldn't have any trouble with the double-sided tape coming up your needles. So, hope that helps. Thanks, everyone.